Sorry, Commissioner. Hello, Victoria here. Is the acting team manager. I'll start the time. There's your card. I've got it on. Oh, I'll press that too. Sorry, you can press that too. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Get Ready for Harvest Field Day. My name is Helen. I've been working in the transport industry for over 15 years, and I'm currently working for the NHPR in the access space as a senior access facilitator, basically specialising in class 2 and 3 applications. Today I'm going to be presenting a high-level overview for access on the Class 1 Ag notice and the Class 3 Grain Mass Management Exception notice. As you may be aware of these notices, in essence, the Ag notice is done to the operators in moving their vehicle for combination from a location to the site where the harvesting will take place, while the Grain Management Scheme notice for operators in moving the harvested grain to participating grain receival site at a higher mat. Thank you, Lars. The agricultural notice exempts heavy agricultural vehicles in combination from certain mass dimension and vehicle standards designated agricultural vehicle zones. This notice is to be used in conjunction with the operator's guide, the maps, and also it's not a requirement for this notice to be carried with the vehicle. The operator's guide and zonal maps are live documents, and it's important that you review the guide and the zone map for any updates or network conditions on a regular basis. Eligibility of vehicles in this notice is based on access to the approved designated agricultural zones, and these zones, as I said before, have different dimensions, mass, and conditions for access. So I just want to have the slide in so that. Now I'm going to talk about the operator's guide. This is broken down into a user-friendly notice that gives an overview of the notice and also gives you the conditions, resources, and maps, etc. You can access the notice on this document by clicking on the light blue box in the top right corner. And today I'm just basically going to speak about the black ribbon, which gives you an overview. I'm going to talk a few specific about conditions, vehicle access, and network conditions. In the networks tab, roads are covered by the notice. I've got to start again, agricultural vehicles and combinations provided access to all roads in the approved zones in the map that is unspecified by specific road manager and structural conditions. This section also outlines participating road manager network conditions and should be reviewed regularly as they may change from time to time. This also includes a short planning video on how to use the zone map and helps operators to easily find approved access zones, conditions, and prohibited roads and structures. The resources tab outlines the vehicle zones, and the vehicles must comply with the dimensions and limits for the zones of travel required. Access in these zones is for all public roads at any time, and it's otherwise stated in the notice, the guide or the map. You'll also find the combination link and zones table located in this tab. The notices are subject to conditions to ensure public safety, asset protection, or to prevent adverse effects on the community, such as noise, pollution, or traffic congestion. To conditions in this tab are broken down into the national convention and national requirements, other national conditions, and this also includes the pilot and escort conditions, specific state and council conditions, a section on warning sign, and also on registration and licence. A useful tip for reviewing these conditions is to review the national convention and national requirements sections first, then all other national conditions, which includes the pilot and escort conditions. Then consider the specific council conditions related to this notice. Next up is the grain harvest scheme exemption notice. This scheme exempts from state prescribed national requirements and operates in conjunction with the New South Wales Grain Management Scheme. A copy of this notice must be carried in the vehicle, and the operator can provide a legible electronic version of the notice. This notice applies to areas eligible to participate in grain receivers, subject to compliance with any listed conditions applicable to the area route as set out in the Grain Harvest Management Scheme. Operating under the scheme, eligible vehicles are up to 5% of the DML total mass of the vehicle, combination with the triaxial group, when delivering cereals, oilseed pulses, to participating grain receivers in participating council areas. This notice also provides tables showing the total mass financial groups, and then you can view the areas noted before grain receivers along with the condition. I've got an example of the map up here. This example shows the participating councils and approved grain receivers along with the approved state New South Wales roads. So this map here is showing of outline 4. So in the green, that's showing that's an approved participating council. In the pink shaded area, they're participating, but they do have conditions.
What zone is, say, Fordville Park in there?
Oh, Fordville Park, I just put this,
What zone? Is it in one?
zone 3.
Zone 3. That's a good start.
So this one is a representative just to show that
Yeah.
I just moved into this area.
But your zones are not, you say it's simple and easy to use, it's the most complicated, boring, all stuff thing I have ever seen in my life. And what's the name, in parks, they can't read it. They can't understand. They put me on the phone to someone in Sydney, they couldn't tell them.
Okay,
They can't understand it.
I'll take this offline. We can have a chat after this, and I can show you on the laptop how this works. But basically, what it is on this map, it's colour coded. So, as I said, one council's green, that's approved areas, and the local council's roads. The pink is approved, but it has conditions. Then in the blue, we've got the Transport for New South Wales state network roads that are approved. So when you're on this map, by clicking on the map with your mouse onto, say, the green area, it will come up with any conditions. If you click on the pink, there's a little example there that I've got that will show the travel conditions not imposed. And then also in conjunction at the top of the map is in the red box is a link also to the restricted access vehicle networks that you also have to comply with to travel. So I'm more than welcome afterwards to, we can go on a laptop and I can show you how to use maps. The next what I want to think about is if you're going to use this particular combination, which is prime mover or reaching truck, carrying a header, towing a time trailer, this is by permit only. This is not covered under the ag notice. In New South Wales, this combination has to be up to 30 metres in length, and width and height can be up over 4 metres. The time trailer does not have to be registered. So this, if you're using this combination, you'll need to apply to the NHBR for Class 3 permit. And when you're applying for the permit, you'll need to, first off, your first application will need to be requesting the zones 3 and 5. So that will give you general access there. Then after that, you require, that's the state road, sorry. And then after that, if you require access to local council roads, you'll need to submit a separate application requesting road access, for example, Gubbo or Parks or Council. So,
With this permit, which
Yes.
we have one.
yeah,
When just a tow home trailer on its own with the same unit without the machine on the back, is that still part of the same?
that's
permit, or is it
part of
separate?
class, comes on the class 1A notice.
So we don't have to have a separate permit to do that.
No, well, you may not need a permit, because if you comply with the class 1 notice, like, and the zone and the roads you acquire, you may not need the notice. If you check your network maps and where you're travelling isn't on the notice, you will then have to apply for a permit, which will be a class 1 agricultural notice permit. But for this combination, because it's carrying the harvester on the, it's a load carrying, so therefore it's not defined under the ag notice, so you will have to have a separate permit.
Yeah, so if I want to take the comb somewhere, but I don't need to take the header, I can hook that up and take it
So
under the same notice.
so if you remove the harvester off the back of the truck with the prime mover,
Yeah.
then you would fall under the class 1 notice.
What speed are you allowed to travel given that the program trail is not ready? It's only conditionally registered, it doesn't need any registration.
You have to meet the road safety rule for that.
So is that, what, that's capped at 40 k's an hour, or was it 60 or 50 or 20 k's below the posted speed?
I'd have to take that and get back to.
Even if you're running under that permit,
Yes, so the
the load
permit,
carrying one, sorry.
yeah, so under that permit, it would just be stating that this is the combination length. It would have the details of your length, width and height. Also, it would give the road manager that if he was to, restrict him for a certain, speed limit, which would impose that as a condition on the permit to be allowed.
Yeah, so the permit doesn't override the fact that registration conditions say X.
I would have to find out that for you after the. Yeah, or alternatively, if you didn't want to request for the zone, and you're just doing a one single route, you could apply for a single route application for this combination. We just wanted to raise this because we've had a lot of people not realising that they do need a permit for the combination type. So to help with harvest season coming up, the earlier we can get this particular application, the better it will be. Also, when you are submitting this application, if you can provide a photo of the combination, it does assist when processing this application.
Well, you leave that page, please.
Yes.
If you look at the configuration of using that with the normal prime mover of a drop deck, look at the car behind that configuration.
Yeah, so,
I leave them, yeah, that's the prime mover, it's a set there. Now, normal prime mover, drop deck trailer, they can't look behind that, similar to the Americans do.
Yeah.
With that system at all.
no, we haven't done any of those ones yet. This is basically the only combination that we've been doing here in Australia. Well, that since I've been working in Access, it's the only one. So basically, they have the outrigger frame on the back of the prime mover, so.
Yeah, it's just a normal drop deck trailer, and there's coverage on the back, and the car on the back of that again. So.
Yeah, no, I have to check with the road as well on that one, so. We'll see. Well, see, that one's a prime mover, and normally a prime mover doesn't have a load on the back of it, so this prime mover's actually got as I said, an outrigger frame built onto it.
Most of low loaders drop that anyway, I mean,
Yeah, but I'm just
if you're
saying,
gonna put the header on a low loader, it's not that.
this is a totally different
If you're in a low
combination.
loader, like I've sort of about,
And the hitch is
it becomes a road trailer,
Yeah,
which then means the rear trailer, which has got the cone on it, and I think I'm right, someone will correct me, it's got to conform with normal registration, brakes, everything else. That's where we're at the moment.
yeah, and this one's only mentioned because the trailer is not compliant basically, so we just have to have a permit for this configuration. Honestly.
Yeah, So you go just back to agricultural combination, had a picture of a tractor with a spreader on it. That one, so on the right hand picture as we're looking at it, that combination, agricultural combination there, right? Class 1 agricultural
Yes.
combination, correct?
Yes,
Zone 3,
well, it depends.
and in zone 3, right? That combination or similar has to be the same classification I want to call that tractor with a plough behind it, the close to 3 metres, right? So the plough is not as wide as the tractor. The tractor's about 4 metres because of the dual. Do I need an escort or an escort vehicle for that?
Okay, what I would have to do.
4 metres.
What I would have to do is we have to go to the operating side. In the operating side, I would go to the computer tab, I would have to go down this
Oh, yeah,
table
you've
there
done
for
that.
the vehicle. And in that, you select your vehicle, it will tell you the dimensions, and then it will give you the condition.
Tells me the dimensions and everything, but it doesn't say whether I need an escort
It
vehicle.
does,
It does,
really right.
there is in there, I'll show you later, I'll show you out of the document, I can show you in the
That'd be great
document,
if you could.
where it states, like you say, whether you do one car, or escort, et cetera, so.
What,
it's all-
what
it's all-
width do I need before I know that?
So it's after, depending on the vehicle, after, if it exceeds a certain dimension, then you will need, escort.
I know, but what's it, you never state that what dimension it is and where it comes in.
Sorry, it does, mate. It breaks it down, 3.5 under day escort, 3.5 to 4. It's got to read.
Let's take it offline, I might, we can get that problem in a minute. So on behalf of the access team, I just want to emphasize that we're here to assist in making your permit applications easier. If you've got any issues, you can contact us at NHBR for our contact centre or email at info@NHBR. I'll also be available after the morning tea this morning to take any further questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Helen. So I forgot to say this in my intro. At 10:30, when we sort of wrap this bit up, and we get outside, all the speakers will be around to answer any of those questions that you've got. So we've got some other NHBR people in the room as well. So things up with that.
I know some of you good to see some faces again, familiar faces, for real, instead of on a computer, it's fantastic, yeah. So I'm the stakeholder lead for the NHBR for New South Wales, so I'm kind of like a middleman between people like myself and the outskirts areas. We've got some of the compliance guys as well. So you know, they just wear a different shirt this week when you last saw them, that's all. Yeah.
So you're going to talk about that?
I think Robbie is going to talk about it, Robbie Wilson later on. Yeah, I'll make sure he comes in. Actually,
So definitely go and see those guys. Was about the questions that came. Now, Kieran, that's on the line as well, wanted to answer the question about the grading of the management scheme from earlier. So Kieran, I might throw it to you. Kieran's for a long break.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit to it in the slides that we've got. It sounded like there was a problem though with staff training at our park site and understanding of the mass limit. Is that what the question was?
Was your question about, is there misunderstanding of style of that? No?
Oh, no, that's it. I know, yeah, we've had some problems at parks. That's all with some different combinations. So that's what I thought it might have been. But if no issues, then let's move on.
Let's move on to Brett. So Brett's got me as well. It's an update from Brett Branch about what's happening. So Brett's our new senior road and then the parking access, something, I'll give you that.
Morning all, morning those online. It's a community page. Someone haven't seen reports on Brett Graham, Senior Manager Road Access.
I'm in Transport New South Wales freight branch, so pretty much my team looks after every vehicles and assets on our New South Wales state roads. So a lot of this you would have seen in recent times. So I know we're not necessarily on time, but we're not sort of running too late. So I'll lean over this stuff and questions. So just on those, I won't read through those, but just got some notes here. The grain freight tasks want to optimise the use of the high road vehicle across the road in New South Wales. As you can see from those figures, those numbers, the freight parts are big and is driven by communities and critical for our communities. It is vital to supporting economic activity and also direct the New South Wales economy. While these figures are drawn for the New South Wales freight ports planning, yet to be adjusted to incorporate the new figures, the headline remains the same, that we are still anticipating significant growth in freight in New South Wales in the future. And I know we've got to run out and now we're going to do after settling. So it's phenomenal what we're sort of seeing in freight targets. So Farmgate, a lot of you would be aware of Farmgate Access. It's now operational, it's up and running. Farmgate Access is a joint New South Wales government, NHPR, through freight productivity, making first and last mile journeys in Farmgate. And able safe and legal access for high productivity vehicles travelling low volume council roads, low volume council roads, benefiting local farms, businesses, and councils and communities. New South Wales government is committed to supporting local government to achieve the shared goal of every vehicle access and service. So the benefits, enabling use of more productive vehicles safely transport grain and livestock from the farm-gate market, bringing fewer trips to the freight tasks. I know that's come up in the last, 12, 18 months, particularly through COVID, we've had high prices of vehicles on the network. Reducing red tape for farmers and transport operators by reducing the need for access permits, so they're not going to pull the maps, you don't need to get the permit. Opening up more than 10,000 kilometres of local road in the Australian council area during the pilot period. So like I said, it's the Ministry of Council operating. And increasing visibility across council rate network using telematics, private councils to the telematics applications. So we Transport New South Wales purchased 2 CAP programs that in Council New South Wales, so we can see the data and see what's going on with networks. Grain harvest management scheme. So Helen touched on that. So eligible vehicles, I don't get into changes, there's nothing changed at the moment as far as grain harvest for us in New South Wales. I think you'll all be aware of what's on that screen there. I think probably an important point to mention is that we're working with NHPR in big roads, and it's more than likely that most of the extent from September. And we're also looking at simplifying and harmonising access to moving the need to carry the notice. And the vehicles, we're looking also at vehicles to find location or remove the need to reduce practical. So all those things are on the table. We're working with those jurisdictions, the NHPR, civil practice, and I suppose we'll sort of start to confirm actually what we want. Grain harvest, no enrolment process. Again, you'd probably be aware of all that. As I said before about carrying a copy, we're hoping we can remove it for that. We won't have to do that anymore, aligning with what the national one is. Comply with conditions of grain harvest management notice and the map. Of course, the map's there. So the future, the telematics, the TAP program, I said it's all about data. We get a lot of questions about any commodity moving in New South Wales. What's moving, where's it going, what's moving, where's it gone? Which we don't. So we're starting to go to more data-driven technology, so we can actually build a future for our networks and understand what's going on with the freight. So a couple of things mentioned there, machine learning. There was a big hell of a little one up at Stockton in Newcastle, where we got a big screen camera. So it's got solar panels on and everything else. It's just there, it's a machine learning camera. It's literally like it's AI. It'll just start filming the vehicles going across, and people like me, we've got to sit there and sort of say what the vehicle is and have time to hit learn so we can actually see what's going on. It's not for enforcement, it's not for compliance, it's for us to understand what's going on in the freight car. So we're starting to put those out a little bit more. Automated number plate recognition, the same sort of thing. Rail level crossing tool and bridge assessment tool. So all these tools allow us. So when I started, it was 30 years I've been in transport now, 10 years in freight. When I first started, we didn't even have a road frame. Everything was on the Gazette notice, it was very quick to lift and it was very cumbersome. So with the maps now,
we've been able to be more transparent, and with access now with these telematics and all this technology, we can open up the network even more because we've got assurance that the vehicle is doing what it is doing, what it's supposed to be doing. And for any of those that might have on the highway machine bridge, that's been restricted to 68.5 ton HMOV for many, many years. In recent times, with the machine learnings and bridge monitoring devices and whatever else, we can put it over because we can got the assurance that government can So it's people will say, oh my God, it's big brother, I've got straight to that. But if you look at the glass half full, it helps us, it helps council, it helps communities know what's going on, and then we can be a little bit more strategic in what's operating on the network, where to spend our funds, what roads do we do first. And most importantly, I know they use this in Queensland on some of their networks, and they found out that when you do a bridge or do the mass loading, they call live load factor because that vehicle is going to be more than one vehicle on the bridge. In this particular area, there was one truck due to it less than blue moon, so they'll increase the mass out of structure. So there's benefits in this as well. And of course, it's also a partnership with local government. I mean, they are partners sort of 280,000 kilometres of road, and most of them managed by local councils. So we need to work with them and get critical in this aspect. And that's it. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, I've got one. Combined to put on a lot of the bridges on a lot of the back farm roads, recommended weights. Which don't come anywhere near the compliance weights for normal road vehicles, for dry axles, bogies, that sort of thing. Now, what I've been told is that's enforceable, but the sign is only a white sign that says recommended. How can that be enforced? Is that them just covering their bums? What is it? I think it depends on, and you need to sort of talk to the legal person about that, because we had a sort of bridge, so we have bridges on local roads as well, and we were uncertain what sign to put up that was actually enforced. So it really depends on what sign is how bridge, whether it's it's just recommended, like, yeah, recommended. Yeah, you certainly, you need that input, what sign, some might be right, some might be yeah. Yeah, well, they put them everywhere, so it's basically no one can load anything up other than it. Yeah, it's probably within good reason. I mean, if they bring well the bridge to us, and no one will use it. So we've got to understand that. Yeah, I've got that out for a quick half hour meeting, so I can sort of run, but I'll keep the rest of that. So that's all. Yeah, so I get a question.
Yeah, Steve Lane, I'm the DD report. Sitting here with Richard Jane as our engineer. Partnership with local government is fine, and we're really keen to get productivity happening. But what we can't get to you guys is whether you're going to indemnify us for the farm gate access clearances of the roads that are clearly not up to the standard. If the truck, $1 million rig tips over and still the flow, the insurance companies are searching for like sharks to try and avoid their liability and us. You've got Ben out here from Parks as well, and Phil Ben's in a similar situation. The same sort of question. So if you indemnify us, we're happy to come on.
I'm probably not going to take over this back, but ultimately, heavy vehicle national law is after us. Road managers on the road managers in New South Wales. I'm responsible for access decision, reasons, defining conditions, and whatever else for any road that we manage. Counts to them the same way. So. As a road manager, we're responsible for it. If the road is not suitable, well, no access. Or depending on the circumstances, we apply a risk approach. So for us, how many vehicles, what's the road, what's the AADT, what's the task? So we apply that in a risk approach, and it might be suitable for a freight task, 10 vehicles a day, but a lot of vehicles that want to use it once or twice a week, we could say yes, and we'll put conditions on it. So it really is what's the cost. Yeah, just talk. Two slow quality roads are usually outdated roads. And that's just by the nature of what they are, they don't get much transport. We put area mostly highways, so that's why we look at this. And just with the overseas, we're aware of the restriction on budgets for the roads, and usually it's those slow quality roads. The last one, and I think
there's a person in the room here now that would say that all of our roads are really good at the moment. Yeah, we've had problems last and we're better. And we always argue that farmers have been able to get all their crops in this year because it's too wet. We're the same with roads having roads. We try to do our best to make it worse. And it only takes one or two big people coming down the west, narrow, low, low. So, and I think anyone who looked at the records from Jews I think it's extremely obvious. I will only entertain open individual loans with the proper assessed. There would be some very, very strict rules. And that's not about me. It's about me protecting the equipment that gets used, protecting the payload, and all those other factors. And it's not an ask company to sign on that. It's a protecting fire and protecting property.
You're right, as your position as the road manager and people making those decisions, that's fine. I mean, maybe sit down with the operators or the people that are going there and have a chat with them. So what are the options? What are the different views we can use? You know, you might have 20 different electricity together out there, which may impact that road. We could have one or two high-profile bids. So it's not. There's no one answer. It's a conversation, I think, and managing that access, that risk, that vehicle type in the past. And it's individual one. No one putting pressure on. Yeah.
And just to get on with this story, it's a question about the loading of bridges.
Yeah.
And that is because the councils in our area actually were invited assess the number of bridges to see what they could take. And there's a very famous case that actually changed the entire water across New South Wales. And that was the road in Central Council case. And it was actually concrete truck that went over one of these bridges that had a lot of line. And that truck ended up in the creek.
Yeah.
Straight through the creek. And it was massive court case and the court got high court and so on. But at the end of the day, if you go over a bridge, whether it's a black line sign or you have been advised that if you take a certain way and if you overload and you end up in the creek, it's on you. That's bottom line, that's what it is. You might have told that you can't take more than that load. You choose to ignore it by taking a fully loaded vehicle or exceeding that load and you end up in the creek. Don't come. Stop getting more than orders. Because there's a number of bridges in this side. Even though we've replaced 7 systems bridge last year, we've got 3 bridges this current financial year that we're looking at replacing. And we're working our way through them. We've got all these old that portfolio bridges that and steel side and work on and stuff. 50 systems everything. Yeah, that's it. And we're facing a problem with the state government that they won't recognise these what's called composite bridges, which is the steel tender one, under the timber bridge replacement program. And we're being knocked back for Australia's business to replace it because it's not substantial. So we'll be trying to reach out to get funding to remodel them and start using policy and so that they can take HML and do this. We would really love to extend it and work out the boost stuff like a road train. But it's going to take time and we have to do it properly on West Coast approach. Yes. So it's not about conversation, it's about doing this. And we would like to say government and we like to do a proper solution where we can actually properly see the road and do it. Because we're one of the we're having a lot of trouble with staff and as much as we're well intentioned, wanted to expand out the network, we're really struggling with every council in the same way.
Sorry, the Richmond on the bridges, is that purely under the action group or the what? Because obviously, depending on the combinations, different access spacing, what's actually on the bridge is going to change.
It's actually.
And is there a date for the site?
Yeah, because, small span bridges, it's usually on the actual group. Yeah. But the bigger span bridges, it's on the whole, because when you think, if you've got this, moving over, and you've got 10 meter span.
Yeah, right. So
then
like
the line-
30 like this side.
So it's, every bridge is different. Sometimes I've seen it where it's on actual group, smaller ones, and sometimes it's on process.
Is it on the side? The other one? Correct?
If it is, I think we've got to get the one out.
Yeah, I was thinking it like that.
Most of the ones around here say roads.
Yeah.
But, I know a lot of the transport bridges.
Sometimes they go down.
Yes, so if they do, and that's a right, it's like, that route, and that's. And that's what.
I just want to know what we can do about it, because the bridges we're talking about, in that time, the world's population has actually doubled, you know, and, combine harvesters, you know, or hydro, whatever back in those days. And a lot of these roads that we use today, you know, we look back in the sixties. You talk about farm gate access, I call it, paddock gate access, to it, the combine harvesters, and the grains left in the paddock. And all year long, that's the limit. So, you know, we're the fire, rather than the
It's almost, we're challenged and we can't, like, it's not the panacea, it's the beginning of the process to sort of fix that large problem. This is a step forward. And it's never going to be everything. We've got to sort of, here's this, how can we expand on it, fix it, add to it, whatever else. And what Richard did up right too. So there's that element on it that we need to review. And I think that's one thing we haven't done more passes review often. We need to review it more often to see how we come up.
So I'm going to keep going because we're behind.
Yes, I'll go.
But if you've got a question, come and see Brett. See Richard gives away. So Richard, if you've got more questions, you've got part questions, there's a band, if you've got a pass, but come on, Ben. Thank you for wearing my list. Weekly.
Mel,
Yeah.
sorry, just quickly, to answer your question about signing. If it's yellow signing, what the one on the ESC, most of them, it's an advisory sign. Yeah, if it's white, it's going to be a regulatory sign, but you're all behind. I think about that, obviously stop it on red, but white sign, it relates to yellow sign.
So even though the wording.
Well, the wording is on a white sign, say it's a bridge load limit of 10 tonne, that's the law.
Even though the wording now says recommended, but it actually says recommended.
Where's the sign?
They're right throughout. It's only you and no one knew anything about it.
Let's chat to Marty afterwards. I want to keep going because we are 10 minutes behind schedule. We want to get out here on time. Let's move on. So, Kieran, you're next up. I can drive your slides if you like.
Could I steer, Mel, please? I've added a couple of extras.
Oh, okay. You can steer. Yeah, you can share. Do I have to stop sharing? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Of course, you added more slides. There you go. So, welcome to that. Kieran's the Road Compliance Manager for Grain Corp, and he's also the Chair of the Grain Transport Safety Network. I've got that right?
Yes. Thank you. Good job.
Excellent. There's your little intro. Okay, while you're still doing that, I'll keep talking. So come and find me afterwards for this year's USB. So it's been updated with the new notices or whatever other relevant information there is. If you're online, I will post it to you if you send me your address in the chat, please. Okay, Kieran, all yours.
So I'm not as good with, all right, are you getting?
Yep, we can see that.
Cool, okay. So yeah, thank you, Mel, great intro. How long would you like me to speak for?
10 minutes.
All right, I'll finish at 9:05. So yeah, Kieran Gardner, I've been working with GrainCorp for about 12 years. The role that I do with GrainCorp is Road Compliance Manager. So if you're dealing with GrainCorp and you're dealing with our truck charts, you're dealing with our time slotting system, you're dealing with access to sites, or the harvest management scheme, that's my patch. Today, though, I'm speaking as the chair of the Grain Transport Safety Network Road Movements Subcommittee. So the GTSN has been around for about 5 years now, and the purpose of it is to get some consistency between the big bulk handlers, because we are the mechanism that a lot of people learn about and comply with the heavy vehicle national law. And the idea of the group is to get consistency between us. And what I'm going to show you today is just some of the stuff that you'll see at GrainCorp, but you'll also see at some of the other Grain Transport Safety Network members. So purpose of the group, zero harm across the supply chain, pretty straightforward stuff. I won't go too much into this, there's a lot of detail on the slide. The members, though, we've actually got a few new members as well. Manildra have just come on board, which is great. But all of the big bulk handlers are part of the GTSN, and we meet 3 times a year in person. We run monthly calls, and the purpose of the group is to look at what we're doing the same or similar with how we manage our heavy vehicle national law risk, and then where there's potential duplication, that we can get consistency on those processes. One of the biggest achievements that we've got is we all now use the same truck chart. So if you go onto any GTSN member site, you should see this truck chart. It is freely downloadable on our website. Members can customize it. So over in SA, Viterra don't show the whole country's weights, they only show their harvest weights. But this chart is something that we're really proud of as a group, and getting those standardized codes, because we know that it is confusing if you're going between different bulk handlers, what the different mass limits are. We have also put out a 170-page book. That's how many pages it takes to explain all of the different mass limits you see with grain trucks operating up and down the east coast of Australia and into South Australia. It is complicated. The chart's only got a dozen codes on it. So they're representing 99% of the truck movements outside of harvest. During harvest is about 96. So the dozen codes are pretty common. During harvest, though, we see a lot of other wacky and wonderful combinations, and there's just a lot of technical information as well about the different mass limits that operate in the different state. Even across those dozen codes, you can see how many columns we're having to use, though, to describe the different mass limits, and the 15-odd footnotes that help just dig into some of the different things and different mass limits that we're dealing with, and what we're doing. A real strength of the GTSN is we are a single point of contact, though, for the regulators about policy. So the GTSN regularly meets with the state and the NHVR about what we're doing with the harvest management scheme and how we can make it work moving forward into the future, to potentially have a national harvest management scheme and get more consistency there. So it makes it better for the regulators, and it's better for us as well, because we're all in the room together and we're trying to have a consistent approach on how we manage the grain task and minimise the underloading that we get with the grain harvest task. A lot of people think about the harvest management scheme as an overloading scheme. It's not. It's a scheme to allow trucks to load closer to the mass limit. And the way that it does that is it gives a tolerance above the mass limit, the general mass limit, to allow that to happen. The vast majority of trucks, though, during harvest are underloading. You can see that data in the New South Wales harvest report if you go digging around for that. Brett, I don't know if Brett's still in the room, but Brett, I nicked your slide. I think it's appropriate to talk just in this area about the different kinds of trucks that we see and how the harvest management scheme works. And this is actually a cracking slide. So on the right hand side here, you've got a quin dog. They don't get a harvest mass limit. PBS truck can only operate under the PBS 2A network on under the truck and dog PBS notice. Pretty complicated, pretty rare. I was a bit surprised to see it in there because you don't really see too many of them running around. But that's a particular truck that doesn't get a harvest concession. Running behind that though, two common 9-axle B doubles. They of course do get the GML plus 5% mass limit, and then if they have NHVAS mass, they get another 0.8 of a tonne on top of that. So this is the dynamic that we're grappling with as an industry, where we've got all these different combinations and just trying to train the different staff that we have on how these things work. GrainCorp last harvest hired over 800 casual weighbridge operators. So we have to explain to them the difference between all these different trucks, which on that picture, if you don't know much about trucks, they look pretty similar. Something that's quite exciting, this is a strategic initiative and not quite sure exactly how it's going to land, but pretty much everyone's got a mobile phone now in their pocket, a smartphone, and phones create a big opportunity for the GTSN to help automate that training process with our staff, where truck drivers would be able to go through a wizard. We're working very closely with the NHVR to try and get API data feeds to populate as much of this data as possible, and then have that data be communicated either with QR code, or it might be visually through the screen, or it could be through the mobile phone network with GTSN members to help streamline that process. The interaction between truck drivers and Grain Transport Safety Network member weighbridge operators, particularly during harvest, is a point of tension. We want to accurately identify the mass limit. There's a lot of trucks that are having the mass limit be too low, and then some that are too high. And it's just getting that mass limit right so people know what they're aiming for when they're loading and getting that feedback. So exciting development there. I'll skip over this one because we're almost out of time, just to move on to the grain code of practice. This is something else that the GTSN is very keen to work on. So the NHVR implemented this thing called a master code, which gives guidelines on how to manage risk. That was released about 3 years ago. Now that code has been there, and the idea is industry would have their own individual codes. Initially, the GTSN was steering away from that, but the NHVR is starting to release more codes at the moment, and they've changed the process to implement those. And working with the NHVR and the GTSN, we met with the NHVR up at their offices as the GTSN in July, and a code could be a good pathway towards a national harvest management scheme for the industry, because there are these notices that exist out there, and they're all quite inconsistent. So if the GTSN can have a code, that could be a way to do the national harvest management scheme. Another biggie is a code could give guidance on how to manage trucks that exceed the mass limit. That's fairly standardised between the GTSN, but if we put it in a code, that would give a minimum target that people could help the different operators that are out there dealing with trucks. What should happen when that truck exceeds the mass limit, because it will happen during harvest due to the nature of the task. The third point that could sit in the grain code is how to manage axle groups. Heavy vehicle national law, when you read it, says you need to know the gross combination and the axle group mass limit. And the grain industry measures total combination mass, where you don't have weighbridges anywhere to manage axle groups. There's ways to manage axle groups in that situation. Most trucks outside of harvest have NHVAS mass, and they have systems and processes. But that's something else that could exist within a standard on how it would be done with the grain within a grain code of practice, because I don't think we're in a position as an industry to bin all our trailers and have baffles in them to manage axle groups and all those different sorts of things. That's it for me, Mel. Bang on time.
Yes, you did it right on time. The time has just gone off. Brilliant. Any questions for Kieran? No, you've got no hands up.
That's easy.
Yeah, easy. The book and the chart are on the USB with live links to the website so that you can get the up-to-date version if it's updated at any point. Thanks, Kieran. Let's move on. Power lines. So Kieran, power lines. So this is Jason. He's the public and operations safety specialist for Essential Energy, and I will just.
Sorry, I feel like I'm rude standing.
Sorry, Kieran, we'll get the slides. I'll screw here again. I don't know what that one. Oh, which is Kieran.
This one here.
So Kieran, power. There you go.
Thanks, thanks.
So, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Steve, for coming. What I'd like to come along and talk something different. Now, I know we're talking about this vehicle directive, but yeah, no, hopefully over this 15 minutes, we can give us some knowledge. We've got James here, around local depot leader from Parks. So just to make sure that you guys don't sort of take a bit of the ground and argue or something like that. Look, just a little bit around, my personal journey. I've been around electricity for about 30 years, last 3.5 years, and public safety space. So pretty much dealing with these type of situations. So a little bit of sort of probably familiar kit that you may be sort of running or operating or different things like that. Their actual incidents are tragically, hopefully a couple of steers there aren't because you recognise someone as an operator that you know. But I mentioned I've been in this role for about 3.5 years. Basically, during that time, we've seen 5 fatalities, another 10 serious injuries, predominantly. I'm not saying serious injuries, I'm talking bits and pieces, missing toes, fingers, all that sort of stuff. No, feeling just be burnt, so it can bite. All right. Along with those incidents, like even overnight, we had our first skipper incident related to grain. We've actually got like a section of our network just over the border in Queensland, and we had a skipper go up basically straight into the light bulb line. Our guys saw the tire marks when they were there, so thankfully, person alive, so that's a good start. Okay, but on their way back to the depot, the truck parked up and blown out tires. As that dangerous can be, it can't be, it may be that just at that point in time, you may sort of roll the dice and you get lucky. But if you've got high voltage power line contact with tires, they can explode up to 24 hours later. So it's not just that immediate impact, but it can be really dangerous stuff. We understand that power lines can be really, really hard to see. They can blend in the background. So anyone seen power lines in Lady Bay? Charles, well done. Anyone else?
Yeah, where we go.
What's that, sorry?
You know the way we
Okay, yeah, well done. Hopefully by the end of the session, we sort of get some recognition. Look, for James and I, we say cases even on holidays, you roll down the road, you look at power lines, in the bridge, you might saying, hey, you guys on the road. But that's what we're trying to do. So I'm guessing here that obviously in the audience that you're operating machinery and things like that, that's your view. So that's what you sort of obviously get familiar with, and that's what you become used to sort of concentrating on. That's part of the issue that we actually have is that because power lines can actually blend into the background, most people know the power line's there. You talk to people, I go, I knew the power line was there, I just didn't see it. So how did that happen? Yeah, it's so conscious, they blend into the background. So like I just mentioned, if you're operating machinery, it's like you've got a car, you do get focused on what you're doing all of a sudden, you
you're on the fast forward, oh, wow, I'm here. Then actually realise that you actually done the trip, right? So when you're operating a machine, it could be exactly the same way. You focus on what you're actually doing, whether it's, I wanted to try and sort of, the experts are probably different sort of sectors represented here, you know, amongst that broader ag piece. But you become focused on what you're doing, and those downlines will actually lead you into what's actually happening. So how can we avoid it? It's all about having a plan. So it's really important to have a plan, and that's a bit of a sort of out there statement, isn't it? Like, how do you have a plan? So does that mean anything that way? Like we say, outline safety plan? So any ideas what that might encompass?
Yeah, sure, we probably got
Yeah, well, that's perfect. Yeah, that's all good. So yeah, well, that's great. Any other ideas? What's that, sorry?
that one, didn't get out of that. Probably, well, that's what's up to do, you know, a lot of time on top of a cup of tea, probably good for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pop out whatever machine you use and look around before you go.
Yeah, well, that's also, you read my notes, that's. But no, that's seriously, that is so important, and we will get to that later in the preso. But you just sort of see hopefully the importance of that. The other part is just understanding, before you start the day, having a bit of a plan in place, to understand where the power lines are in around the property that you're going to be working on. It may not be your property, right? So it's really important to actually get that understanding. Even accessing paves and things like that, sometimes there's some power lines over those access points. So it's really important to try and cover those so they hold on top. Sorry, one thing I did mention is that we can take a legislative stance. So most people go, what does essential energy make us stay away from power lines, blah, blah, blah. It's not actually our rules, let's say for example, we're there to try and support those rules and try and help you to actually understand them. Those rules are in place for a reason, because ultimately safe work and their regulators and essential energy, we all want to keep it safe. All right, so I'm not sure whether you're familiar with it or not, but there's a code of practice. I'm going to really sort of drill it right down. Basically, what it says is if you're operating machinery where you're raising, standing, or lifting, okay, you can't come within 3 meters of power without a plan in place. So mostly that plan involves combating potential energy. We're happy to come out and free of charge and actually help you with some guidance, okay? But just sort of keep that in mind. Another little quick quiz, I asked you about power lines. How high do you reckon the standard power line is? Now, this is just general. Yep. We have 6.54, that's good. You're not too far off the mark. Yeah, look. So, rule of thumb, 5.5 meters. Bear in mind that those power lines are sag, they can sway, also look up, they can do a jig, yeah, that's all good. Depending on the weather events.
So what's to go with like some of these new estates that are being built on the edge of town? You see the power lines have been there, trucks have been driving, headers and everything in the driving past them for years. Yeah. But all of a sudden now there's one that comes down across like this to join up to someone's house. And you've either got to go on the wrong side of the road or take out power lines to get through there. Where's the standard in that?
So there are standards that we have to meet. Bear in mind, a lot of the new stuff that actually happens, essential energy will certify it, but that's still quite in conjunction between the developer and also a certifier. Yeah, so
For us, the same as residential street, that's 2.5, and then main roads all have to be over that half.
yeah, correct. Yeah, so 100% right. It's certified that actually certified that's why that basically goes between distribution pole and your house. Okay, now you're going to be a much lower way.
The problem with the country town is you've got nearly every street that leads out or to the edge of the town is access to someone's farm.
Yeah, that's it. We do have some major issues with, like I said, the high loads. Basically, we'll give them a high load permit for a route through town. Something happens, they take a wrong turn, and all of a sudden it wasn't there. So, yeah,
We also had one just recently where the power line sagged, where it sagged, gully paddock. And so, yeah, it was 5.5 from the bottom of the gully, through it up on the bank. So it happened that it came down right in the gully.
Yeah.
You had to get them come and measure it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, look, if you do spot anything, well, as part of those checks hopefully that we're doing, and we're sort of trying to quiz you up onto, please call them out. Don't sort of just try and sort of go, oh, geez, let's have a crack and see how we go. You'd much rather come out and measure the height of the conductor, or the power line, sorry, before you go anywhere near it.
And it is all free, even if you're wrong.
Absolutely. We've actually started to get a little bit better at charging, but anyway, we won't go there.
How timely is it that you actually go out? Because I know we've had lots of essential energy out
Yeah,
this with not being timely. So say for instance, one of these guys rang, how long will it take you?
All right, so it depends on the call. So I'll put a disclaimer on that. But I mean, if you were sort of reporting that a power line is low, we'll do everything we can to get out there as soon as we can. So I know that's not the answer you're after, but we could have, say, right, so the 4th crew today, they could be, a couple of hours away on an outage. So as soon as we report through that there's a low power line, they will do everything in their power to be able to restart as soon as they possibly can to get there as soon as they can. So, yeah.
What if
so,
it was powered down? What if the lines was down, Jason?
Yeah.
So that's like, we're gonna drop what we're doing and.
Yeah,
We're a lot quicker.
I like to compliment essential energy. Yeah. You can go through half, so I sort of, now one of them, all, that far above the stuff. And, put it on the three down, quite high. And I rang up and recorded it. When I turned the power off, within 6 seconds, I called the phone.
Yeah.
You take it seriously.
Absolutely. Really appreciate your feedback. You also must be reading the notes. So it's really
Rule of thumb for the height. If you can see the blade clearly, it's probably too late.
absolutely. Yeah.
You don't have to just be honestly fair, and you just look, and if you can see that blade pretty, very clearly.
Yeah.
That wire is probably well under 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the reason why I call it out is, unfortunately, some of the frustrations in my role, I know James, trying to sort of maintain a network, you've got all types of different seasonal events that actually happen, and he's expected to just be out there and be robot and then fail, but the reality is, sometimes it does, so we rely on people reporting like how long through it, so look, where I was actually going, so just to recap, we're talking about a power line safety plan. So what Essential Energy's done is we've partnered with our mates in Queensland. I don't get all sort of like Queensland, they've actually done a really good job with this look up and live at. So last week we spoke about QR codes, so anyone's pretty handy there with our phones, scan that QR code, obviously it might be a lot on email trying to log you anything, but it is simply a totally free power line safety planning tool. So you see by the photos there, you can see the funny looking lines there, like you've got some black dots, that's power lines and power poles. So doesn't matter what type of industry you're in, like I mentioned before, I understand that you're going to be traveling around farm to farm, it could be your own property. Okay, this tool is going to allow you to be able to induct people onto your own property, or if you're going to a property as a contractor, even from a council perspective, it's just the best tool in enabling you to be able to actually support the plan for where the power lines are. You'll also notice that there's some yellow dotted lines around that power line. You probably think, what the hell are they? They're just there to sort of make them look really spunky. No, they're not. They're actually the excluded zones. So we spoke there before about maintaining that 3 meters away from power lines where you're operating machinery that can be increased in height or raised or whatever. Okay, that's exactly what those yellow dotted lines are doing. They're actually taking the guesswork out of it. So for argument's sake, if you're planning to work in the future and you want to know whether there's power lines there, it's like a tick, yes, the power lines there. Okay, let's zoom in a little bit closer. We'll see those yellow dotted lines. Oh crap, that's in an area where we need to work. So we need to take a bit of a step back
we need to put a bit of a plan in place, then now we're going to attack that. So it's also got the ability to, once you click on the power lines or the actual poles themselves, there's some handy links there to key information from the technology website as well. So it can't go wrong. I haven't said anyone pull out the phone, so we'll be failed in that one, but that's all right. I'm thinking that everyone's already downloaded. So has anyone heard this tool very easily? Okay. Yep. Well done. Cheers. Probably you man over yourself with that one as well. So that's great. So big tip, James. Well done. So have you found it really useful from a planning perspective for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. So through that, so we set some budgets, obviously used to them.
Yeah.
So we've been doing the into it.
Well done. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's just a makes sense. Yeah. So I don't think that like it's there, it's free, and it's just like, oh, why how can we get people to actually use it? It's just such a powerful tool.
There have been other third-party ones as well, like BeRoadReadyForHarvest maps, interactive like the ROD maps. Yeah. I don't know how up to date they are in comparison to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not sure. Yeah, so I can't answer that one. I know that the bit about works, it's there, it's available. So look, the big plan to look up the Pixel is to be able to get that national. So the guy that actually started off Cookie, it's just absolutely, we get all passionate, he's next level. So
Those signs like what you're showing there, from the power line, yeah, they indicate that you might want to set height, but above another set height. Or is there, is it impacted where there's signs not signs or?
so these things, they are just the gold standard in, actually bringing those power in back life. So I spoke there before about when you're operating machinery and how the power line will actually blend into the environment. These things stop that from happening. You can see from that fancy little GIF that we're about to sort of see there, as weird as it is, like, because they are red and white, they've got red and white skirts, they'll spin on just the slightest breeze. It's almost like you've got a flashing light there operating the whole time that you're trying to operate the machinery. Okay, so we're talking like your high risk sort of areas like where there is a spot and you just can't get away from obviously transferring harvest to the basic thing, something like that. Okay, these things are just going to say, hey, don't do that activity here under this power line. Because obviously, we do the maths there before, we understand what the power line heights are. That harvest is going to give you if you're transferring grain across to the chasing bin. All right, so with these markets, last March we actually launched a program. So I'm hoping you're across it, but if you're not, effectively what we did was we understood that the area markets, they're $131.09 each to be precise. We used to tack the labour cost onto that. So you picture that you want to install, say, 10 markers on a property, soon adds up because you've got the price of the market, then you've got the labour cost associated with that, right? So we took all that out of the equation. So last month we will actually throw in our labour costs, okay, for those first 10 markers. All right. I'm going to sound like Tim Shaw here. So I'm ready to say we can tell up. Also got the area markers on their small business rebate. So there's some bits and pieces you actually have to get through to be able to be eligible for that. But if you are eligible for that small business rebate, that is actually now worth $1,000. So you do the maths, okay? So you get, say, I'm not saying that you need 10 markers by the way either, but let's keep it simple for one simple head. All right, so if we do 10 markets, okay, you get the $1,000 rebate. Sorry, I'll get to you that. We get to the $1,000 rebate, okay? You basically get the things for free. So you can't go wrong. Sorry.
You've got to read the question. Does that include the machine hire, like cherry picker or SBWP or?
Absolutely.
The labour and the.
Yeah. So
I put on with a stick roast dinner and then after stick and
what we do. So what we recommend for especially council, like say if you've got projects, they are absolutely next level. There's councils across the state that are using them really effectively. What we do is we don't sort of go under the purchase side of things in that instance. In those circumstances, what we do actually got like a really low fire rate per marker. We do actually charge the labor to fit them in that situation on construction. We're sort of talking here from a permanent structure perspective, but honestly, this is really, really cost effective, and they stop the incident from happening that I see across the state. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, so like I mentioned, they are absolutely fantastic. We've installed a hell of a lot of them across the state, so hopefully you've seen a number of them as you've been driving around highways and properties and things like that. We get very, very few instances. I won't say we don't get any, but we have had a couple of incidents, but comparatively with the amount that we actually install, they are that effective. All right, for the man with the notes, here we go. All right, so hopefully you don't have to use a slide, right? But if things do go wrong and something does happen where you've got machinery tangled up in power lines, does anyone know what the steps are? Don't get out. Well, another man that's read the notes. Really jump in. Oh, no, we'll get to that. All right.
You're going to worry about business, isn't it?
No, that's also just in that's the notes that were supposed to be shared. So effectively what we're after is, there's 3 words here that could save your life, literally. Save, call, wait. All right, we mentioned a couple of them, but what I'm talking about there is that tragically this year we had a fatality earlier this year, and also just in the last couple of months we've actually had another incident where telehandler transported a silo, portable silo through a gateway, and there were 2 people that were in those stats that I talked about, basically really, really serious injuries resulted. What actually happened in both those instances is basically the people weren't aware that the machine model actually contact the power on time. So go back to your point, absolutely, if the machine that you're operating is operating funny or it just doesn't seem right, whatever you do, before you step off that machine, have a look up just to see if there's power lines tangled up. All right, because in both of those cases, tragic for the first one, that guy had stepped off the machine and electrocuted straight away. Yeah, it doesn't just, it's really powerful, and it impacts me every time I see these incidents come through. And then one of our workers like to do something like that as well. So it's tragic. You don't want to do this. So whatever you do, stay or wait. So stay in that machine, all right, pull through to 0, and then wait until the energy comes out. I will give myself a bit of safety to absolutely get off the machine. Back to your point there earlier, yeah, absolutely. As soon as you call 000, they'll jump straight onto our contact center. Our system operator will dump the feeder, but bear in mind that doesn't mean that you're safe to get off. It doesn't mean you're licensed to get off, because the simple facts are that sometimes errors can happen. So that can be in the information relayed to our system operator, or it could be like our operator thinks they're doing the right thing and they try and isolate a section of mine. It may not be exactly where you are. So think about it. Okay, what can happen? You're trying to get off that machine, you're going to get that same effect failure. So we're going to talk to you about step and touch potential as well. So if we do have to get off, so I'm just going to say that I'm hopefully going to go get a community crew around here that's going to stay on the machine, right? If it's on fire, yeah, absolutely, you've got to get off, right? So I'm just about to teach you how to actually get off the machine. So basically, when you actually starting to try to get down the steps to exit the machine, you need to jump clear. You need to keep your balance, because if you start to actually overbalance and you actually have your legs way apart, what's going to happen is down the bottom of that slide, you'll see the rings there. It's a little bit like dropping a pebble into a pond. You get that ripple effect. So if you're going to fall a power line, that's over a gate on the ground or in contact with a machine, okay, it's actually emitting energy. So think about those ripples. If you try to hightail it, between these legs, I put out 1,000 volts difference. All right, what's going to happen to that 1,000 volts? Straight through your body, you wait all electric shock, you have a big sleep, and tragic outcome, all right? So whatever you do, jump clear, hands and feet together, and just shuffling away for at least 8 meters. Don't try and go back and close the door over the That's just done before you put the flight there. Okay, so stay, cool, wait. All right, those 3 words, please remember them. Hopefully you never in this sort of situation, but yeah, word of caution back, great point there when you sort of mentioned it before. Tragically, if the machine can contact the power lines, it may just sort of be operating funnily or weirdly. So in that instance, I spoke to you about that fatality earlier this year. Tragically, the guy had a fire blowout earlier in the day. Okay, when an incident occurred, it was a spray rig, that's exactly unfolded right now, it's a spray rig. Okay, electricity doesn't fit, it's actually emitted through the machine and blown the tire in. So the poor guy's going, bloody hell, another blown tire. Not actually realising the machine is contact with power. Right, it's just that important. Look up and live. Whoops, too far. All right. Finally, we've got on our website more free stuff. So yeah, picture again. So we've got fact sheets, we've got training videos, emergency response techniques we just talked through. Okay, more information about look up and live program. I've got their phone out about that, so you can jump on the website, check that out. Power line markers, there's more information about what I'm spoken through there about the initiative and so forth. And we've also got 3 executive videos. Yeah, they're all free stuff. Absolutely. Go nuts, jump on there. There's a whole range of different stickers available, but it's totally free of charge. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
You're going to have to be really quick.
Sorry.
20 minutes. One question, Richard.
So it's very briefly, just on goals.
Yes.
Do you want to explain?
Yes.
That way, thank you. That price converts up to 24 hours.
Yeah, great point. Thank you very much. Yeah, so what we're talking about there is, it sounds pretty fancy, but it's just those flies and sliding, right? So what we will try and do is if we go out to power and contact all our field workers that are first in this, we will advise you to stand and change down for 24 hours, but not where there's people around, because you can on YouTube and see pretty gnarly type of situations where fire had actually exploded pictures with mining kits, massive fire. It'll go literally dollars. So we want to put up energy in there. That's basically what happens if the fire is really up. So it can take a period of time. That happens. That's what we take 24 hours. So we're trying to get some everything up in a school area where no one goes through it. Okay. The other thing that you might just picking up on that point is hydraulics. Hydraulics, brake lines. Really totally recommend that you get the machine checked over. So we will be available for any other questions.
Oh, why?
There's a lot of people I would suggest don't understand you get electrocuted without touching the lines. Yeah. And that never gets mentioned a real lot. We know you can drive in on that, but difficult is the difference, but it's quite a significant difference. They've only got to be in reverse and you get that. I don't think it's talked about.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. And that can be changed on the day as well. With the conditions. We spoke to had a conversation with Bill earlier about, some of the environmental factors of fire, increased carbon in the area like that. Sorry,
You get bigger than that.
thanks everyone.
Go on to the basic. Okay, all right, we're going to the slide. We've still got 4 to get through before 10:30. Righto. Becky, you're next. So now from our fire safety, that was a good segue.
What's that?
Becky from our local. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Just going to briefly touch on the grading hub side, and then you change to the fire safety time. We'll get to that. So you've all seen the magnet. You've all seen this. Cool. That's great. So it's just going to go through. You take an average of 10 minutes
of your temperature and your humidity. You calculate it up. You get to your 31. Your wind speed is 31 or higher, you need to stop seed harvesting and recalculate and do it again later. So the new fire danger branding sign. As before, we had 6 categories. Out of the interest in the 2025, it came out that it was just a little bit too difficult to understand and read. So they've redone this and it's now into the 4 categories. This will affect the harvest side a little bit. It used to come under the very high section. It now comes under high. So the calculations on the harvest side that do not change. It's just the category on the fire danger rating index that does change. Does everyone understand that? Great. So here they are in more explanation. So most fires can be controlled here. Fires are becoming dangerous. They will spread a lot quicker, and the catastrophic is most lives could be lost. Here's the number ratings to go with it. As you can see, the 40 now sits in the high for the harvest rating. I know I'm going really quickly through that, but outside, do have these all printed. We can look at them in more detail. You can do it that outside. So preparation on farm, when you're doing your harvesting or fixing fences with gardens and things like that, make sure you have the appropriate water sources. So that's being prepared. Early prevention is the best, depending on where your property is depending on where our fire truck is. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 30 minutes. 000 best when you get it done first. The mobile firefighting equipment, depending on the planned activity that you're doing, whether it's harvesting or doing fences. If you do have the access to a fire appliance, let fire come go immediately. That way they can get more appliances on the road to assist you. And if you do have the access to the fire appliance, and you are using it, so they to stop your work, don't help something else. And that is pretty much what that is. I also do have outside QR codes for bird notices. Previously, you bring up in the 24 hours before that no, and your neighbours know 24 hours. We now do it on the QR code. This does not let your neighbours know. You still have to do that. You can do all that on the QR code. You don't have to bring up, but you can bring up still if you like. Okay, so that is basically me. I hope I made up some time for you. You made up 4 minutes, and I have that information so that if you do have any more questions, then we'll go through it outside. Anything really quickly though? No, I must have explained a lot really quickly. We see that time. And the guide is on here. Safe work, Reese. One of our local inspectors. I don't think I've thought about you.
Yeah, I know. It's good. All right. So good morning everybody, my name is Reese Side. I'm the second inspector based out of the Orange office. Pretty small thing, I'm the board inspectors and doing the construction here, but I'm here to Corel and so safe work in South Wales, we don't know where the regulator for workplace compensation legislation state. We look after all workplaces except for mining quarry. The mining quarry is run by the PPI, where everybody else. The workplace can be a Boeing 747, that can be your truck, your spraying, your farm, and also the Ruby Princess. So during COVID, we also the Ruby Princess quarantine down in Sydney. Actually, that becomes workplace to do with that. One of the things to say about we obviously respond with it, respond to complaints.
but then also we need to go over and see what's not supplied here. Workplaces across New South Wales have been divided up into six different industries, of which construction, manufacturing, transport, agriculture, and that's what people say was transport, agriculture. With transport, what we were doing is looking at the industry, what we were doing is looking at what was killing people or seriously injury, putting steps in place to see if we can make sure that doesn't happen. Unfortunately, over 60 people every single year kill in workplaces, more than 100 across the state. With the transport sector plan, first thing we did was consolidate with the industry, have a look at those things that we want to go over. Loosely safe work look after transport when the wheel comes in. When the truck's going down the road, we've got the RMS and supposed to do that. When the truck's getting filled, that's where we want to go over and have some involvement. We went to hundreds of workplaces across Sydney and New South Wales and looked at what was happening out there. One of the things we found was that the high risk areas were initially the loading and unloading of trucks. This was a big issue for us. Coupling and uncoupling the trailers, and all generally other things like things that carry on there as well, and the agriculture stuff. That was phase one. Phase two is live. Was coming up at the end of that. Phase two, we went over to businesses looking specifically at transport companies, looking at transport safety management plans, traffic management plans, where they load, unload their vehicles, and all the Stage three is for us is about last slide. So stage three for us is also looking at the agriculture sector. One of the things that we weren't expecting, and we've added a lot to it, is that it's up a little time. So last week I spoke with a family over at Young, the treasure of the loss of the son, with a piece of recovery here. So I'm trying to prove the pattern, including what we're trying to anticipate a fall tractor. You know that the gear gets bogged out here all the time. So it's about what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen. So these are some of the things we do work on the industry. Part of it will be a notification, part will be putting out some steps about what we can make it happen again. And how we do that is through forums like this, also New South Wales farmers and obviously with the field days, we're actually at that end with our field days and events like this that we the COVID's not done. There's probably three main ways to go about the information you put out. So number one is you've got these in the you've got a box site, waterproof paper, nice bleach sheet, talks about the important stuff you need to go on. Grab one of those, take one of those nice. Number two, small business regulatory guide. We spoke about, so we've got people
Lining up $8,000.
So if you're a business who operates in New South Wales, maybe you have less than 50 employees, you're entitled to have a $1,000 refund. You spend 10 grand on something, you get a grand back. You spend $1,000 on something, free. So those little visual indicators on the power lines, it works out that you actually prove like 10 million and much better. What we like to do is to have a bit of work at your operation, have a look at the most dangerous things you can manage to address that power line. And then number three, obviously, the main is so we'll be out back there today. Always call 3250. People always do it. You can actually invite for these people to come to your workplace. You call it a bit of a friend, it's just to work through workplace safety is like there's people can look at it and go on it's too big. We'll go over there, no charge, we do the logo and help you with that stuff. Any questions today? Otherwise,
Right. Oh, if I could, I might click it. Okay, moving on. Right, safety reminders. Kylie from the regional office. So yeah. Oh, tell me when you want.
I'd like to use the water reminders today, but Kylie, I've worked for transport, I've been in transport for about 5 years. We worked out of Region West, which is based in Park. Region West begins at the Lennox Bridge at Indian Plains, right out to Broken Hill up to Maureen Boggle. So we cover over 50% of New South Wales now. We've got another boundary change as well. We look after Balranald and Wentworth. So that would cover all of you, sure. Two parts to my role with transport, technical side is one of them. So I work with Hawke Park, Orange and Swan Council on their local traffic committee meeting. I field suggestions from council community members in terms of safety concerns. We triage those suggestions and it may or may not turn into a feedback review. Plus, you know, general other concerns about might be an intersection, might be a driveway. The second part of my role is behaviour. So I have 3 behaviour areas that I look after. One of them I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to cover what Trish was here to talk about, and that's fatigue. So thinking about harvest, what are some of the signs of fatigue? Real simple stuff. So how might you feel? Tired, irritable, snappy, cranky, don't go to bed. All of the above. Your yawning, your concentration. Say that loud. Go on. You put it out there. Sounds like married life, short method in terms of thinking about when you're driving, do you get somewhere and you think, how did I get here? Don't remember going past Joe's place back there and that slide place back there. It's the concentration.
Also logistically, brought me up somewhere and going out and I'll get that. Something simple. Went to go and get it, got into something else.
Yep, so you might take a wrong turn.
Yeah.
Really simple stuff, and you might, anyone know what your blood alcohol reading is after 17 hours equivalent to fatigue? Or that sounds like that. 105. So you're essentially, you're at the legal limit of drinking. Okay? Something to think about. Again, during harvest, how do you combat fatigue? How do you make sure you get enough rest? What do you do? Yeah, so sleep is the only answer to fatigue, but how do you get good sleep? Tell me some of the things you do to make sure that you get good sleep. Sorry. So my husband's a shift worker. I know what works for us. What works for you? We'll see if they match. We'll talk about a state roster. Which is hard during harvest, very hard. Eat well, full belly. Yep, your sleep tends to be more comfortable. Keep hydrated. Yep.
Not with alcohol.
Sorry.
Not with alcohol.
You might reach, cutting through that, you might reach for that beer. You might reach for that beer knowing, and I do it, I've had a long day when I want to have a really good night's sleep. I don't drink very much. Relax, to relax. What else? What about the conditions of being a good night's sleep? Classroom. Yep. Comfortable temperature. So you notice you can stay quite comfortable, and that's when you start to go, oh, that could be nice.
You've got family, you can try to organise for kids to be out, you can come and run away, things like that.
Good, good, so far. Silent staff room, still belly. Alcohol.
Well, like, dropping out the caffeine from
Okay, so next question, how do you look after your workers? Not just working for you during harvest, and like family members, might be educational staff, whatever, how do you look after them?
Yeah.
Good. Do you think these have their break pattern in that? Yeah, good.
I think the biggest thing is like trying to tell young people they don't have to prove it. Like, because I'm trying to do it, so I know in grade friends, you have young blokes that say, oh, you know, I can do 40 hours, but what's the point if you end up inside somewhere? Yeah, but, and they really don't have to do it, and the same on good farm, if they're tired, they're driving something for $1,000. But don't put it in the tree.
Here's her test myself. An app on your phone. Highly recommend you download it. You can't lie your way through this app. Get your staff and your contractors to do it. Hold up the phone and show the result. It's not just about answering the question about how many hours sleep you've had. It's reaction time. There's some activities in that app, and I have to attest their reaction time. Also check their memory. Review an outcome at the end of it to let you know how fatigued they are. Download it. Test your tired self. On the back behind you there. You need to remember it, but please do yourself a favour and download it.
What was that app again?
Test your tired self.
The problem with, farmers, blokes operating trucks at harvest time, that sort of thing is quite often the boss is also one of the workers. So to have time, like if I'm 50, 60 k's away delivering grain at plant, I can't go, oh, gee, it's 11 o'clock, I better make sure those fellas are testing themselves on their phones. Like, we just haven't got time to do that. Everyone's got to be sort of responsible for themselves. To a point.
To a point. He was the business owner and the operator had the responsibility to check on them.
Yeah, I agree with Marty with that, because it's a bit like when someone does something really stupid, and then the work site come in and say, oh, we should have, you know, like trained them or inducted them better. You can't do that. But someone has more common sense. What do you do? You're going to go there. Same for Marty on the other. What do you do? When you don't want to do what you do. Yeah. Like people have that responsibility.
And it's up to you as the owner operator to manage that.
What about the distance from letting people contracting out for whether they drive back to caravan park or whatever it may be to get to them. Maybe back to the increasing that. Just because you get off the head of it, I mean, you're home sleep, but that time frame, please, you know. The same with trucks, they might arrive back and forth, they've got into cars, so they're in the car and then drive back to cars.
They will come over and say, you don't manage that because you need to look at
I just got an 8-1.
Look at ships look like, clean tricks. Manage it.
A lot of people are saying 15 hours of work now, and that's work faster, but you can't control what they do once they leave.
And that applies to anyone. You can ask them to declare, have it, you rely on them for their honest.
Not get around that, like, are you fit for work, do it, like, when I go up to the time.
Yeah.
For them,
So one of the behaviour areas I look after is road safety in the workplace. So it's a new initiative on transport where we can come to your workplace and talk to you about road safety and talk to your workers. We can assist you to set up all types of management plans. We can set up ways to prompt how to check life. But how do you know if one of your workers actually got pulled over by police in the weekend? Not unless they were honest. Yeah, so you need to have all these in place. It's up to you whether you want to talk to me later or we can come to your workplace and talk to you. These days are great, but we can talk to you on a call. And there'll be more with it if that comes. But we're here to help.
What you do, when you can't really stop people from doing the wrong thing, There's a classic example of that, was delivering a load of sheep. And he said he'd be there at such and such a time. I rang him up. And I'd obviously woken him up. He was late. And I said, you know, I'm going to be, I'll be there in, you know, I'll be such and such, I'll be there in an hour. I said, well, that's fine. When he got there, he was that tired. It took him an hour and a half to do a half hour's job. Like one load of sheep. He was that tired he couldn't open the gates quick enough. And then when he went to leave, I said, oh, well, you have a camp in now, mate. You'll stop there for a while. You know, everything's off there off all right. Oh, no, he said, I'll be back at Penwood at 2 o'clock. And he said, which way do I turn when I go out the gate? He didn't know which way to turn and how do I stop that? What do I do? I can't say, mate, look, I'm still not fit to drive. You're not fit to walk, let alone drive.
We can.
How?
Have that conversation. Say, mate, what do you think is?
I said, mate, look, you've got to have a sleep, mate. I said, and he said, you knew him, and he said, I've been out of the house 2 days. And I woke him up when he was late, he was coming down, and he was only an hour away, but he was asleep. He pulled over and had a sleep. But I mean, no, oh, right, I'm late, oh, okay, mate, I'll come and do it. I mean, well, he could have said then, no, I'm having 2 hours sleep. But I mean, I can't stop him unless I physically fall into the bloody ground. I can't stop him.
Can't stop him, you could bring a company to work for him, but you've got a knife in here.
He doesn't work for a company. It's his right.
I'm sure Marty, you love a phone call.
Just to interrupt. If you let that driver go, you fall under the track responsibility.
I know.
So these guys pay that, they don't have compliance or next. But just bear in mind, if you let the driver alone and go, you're just as bad as he is.
He wasn't loaded, he was unloaded, he was going somewhere, but I mean, other than physically disabling his truck or him, I can't stop him.
Brings, you can report it.
Yeah, and document it, so that.
Then I report him to you,
Yeah, bring triple R's. If he's that bad, you can't set up, right? Bring triple R's.
oh yeah, he could have it. He's the worst, I've admitted he was the worst I've ever seen, but
The regulating law talks about that.
so then I've covered my responsibility if I really something like.
Absolutely. Do something.
Yeah, this place, I don't need to.
So the last thing I just want to mention is seatbelt. Such a beautiful safety device. Please wear them. We've had a fatality in Warren on Friday. On path, slippery conditions, no seatbelt, slipped into an irrigation channel onto the roof. I think it won't happen to you. I got on Facebook last night to find out that happened to Frank's dad. You're gonna watch Sam's story. Exactly what I've just said. You think it's not gonna happen to you, think again. It's easy to think it's gonna happen to you. Not even confronting videos, no trigger warning, nothing like that. It's just a really good reminder there, please use it. And before I get rail safety week. If any of you have got rail crossings on your farms, we have these with us. Some of you may know that we've been doing an initiative. We've been posting these out to farmers across the region. Just as a reminder, we don't need to talk about how that came about because we all know. We've got the with us today. Got it.
Here we go. Talk about the speed reduction on some of the prospects in
I'm just going to stop that before it plays the next one. Did you want anything else? Oh, it's good. Make sure you have to get signs. Yep. Moving on, and Robbie's online now, so compliance, which is good lead in from the COR question we just had. Rob, I'll hand over to you. Do you want me to drive the slides?
Thanks, Melanie. Yes, you got the slides up, that'd be great, please.
Yep, I can drive the slides. There you go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to everyone here today with the grain harvest pending. My name is Robbie Wilson. I'm the Manager Operational Services with the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. One of my roles is managing the National Operations Team, who coordinate with our jurisdiction states and territories and policing agencies conducting operations on the national, state, and local stage. Part of that is looking at some of the high-risk activities or events that may impact safety across our road network. And I'll go into shortly and just explain about what some of those activities we've found in the past, and I suppose what it tells us looking forward. Just before I go on, for those of you who don't know, as of 1 August, the New South Wales transport inspectors, a part of the National Harmonisation Project with the regulator, transitioned over to the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, and I believe a few of the senior safety compliance officers are there today. Their roles won't change a great lot as far as what they're doing, but part of the national harmonisation is to harmonise national laws, harmonise our national on-road activities. So an example is that you would see the same sort of activities, you'll see the same treatment of how we deal with compliance and non-compliance right through all the states and territories. So that's part of the purpose of national harmonisation. So this year on the road, you'll see the National Heavy Vehicle Regulated Vehicles and then the safety compliance officers in our national regulator outfits. So that's the change that you'll see. I'll go into the slides. If we can click on the first slide, Mel, please. I thought I'd just give a bit of background. In 2021, some of you may be aware, we conducted the National Roadworthiness Survey. This is the second survey. We conducted a baseline survey back in about 2017. The purpose of the survey was to look at across our fleet. We took sample sizes of all the different vehicles and looked at how the national fleet was, I suppose, changing and what are the defect rates. So it's specific around compliance around the vehicle itself as opposed to looking at drivers or operators. So as part of that survey, we took samples of a number of vehicle types, and then we were able to collate that information and then expand that to give us an indication of what the national fleet was like. So during that survey, it was over 3 months, we intercepted and inspected over 8,000 vehicle combinations, and I think around about 13,000 vehicle units. 75% of those passed inspection, so there was no non-compliance detected, which is a significant increase from back in 2016. The lowest rate for conformity, so the highest non-compliance, was in rigid trucks, which was just up from 48%. So significantly non-compliant was the rigid truck component of the fleet. So those of you who have that type of vehicle in your fleet, the purpose of today is just to provide some feedback and information back to industry to say this is what we're seeing, and the likelihood that if you have a rigid vehicle in your fleet, and I'll talk about age shortly, it is likely to higher likelihood of having a non-compliance as far as a defect. During the inspections, we did brake tests on vehicles using what we call a vehicle inspection trailers and over the pits. Brakes remain one of the most common defects at 14%. So again, quite concerning as far as that componentry in the vehicles. I'll just move forward. Next one, please, Mel. So age and non-conformity, probably no surprise, the correlation between the age of a vehicle and the likelihood of having defects. So the relationship, as you can see from the graph there, of hauling units and trailers, the likelihood of having a defect increases with age. And when you get to around that 12-year mark, as we found out, there's a significant increase in the likelihood. So if it's a vehicle, for example, if it's a rigid vehicle and it's over 12 years of age, there's a higher likelihood that there will be some form of defect in there. So the messaging there is if you have that type of vehicle, we would highly encourage you to look to get servicing and work done on that vehicle to make sure it is safe. Next one, please, Mel. So moving into the grain harvest, in 2021, we conducted a national operation looking at the grain harvest in particular. As you'd be aware, coming out of the drought, we've seen back-to-back fairly significant harvests, and grain prices, as you know, have moved fairly high, although they've pulled back a little recently, but they've been fairly high. So the movement of grain, both from a harvesting perspective in volume and also that's moving on road into ports, has been quite significant. So part of the 2021 activity, we did what we call proactive compliance activities, similar to what we're doing today. So it's trying to get information back to industry to say, this is what we're seeing and these are the areas of risk, these are the concerns we're seeing. So if you have a fleet of vehicles or you've got drivers that under your charge or you're operating vehicles yourself, these are the things that we find that are concerning. So if you think to yourself, hey, that's my fleet, or that's what we do, chances are that there'll be some risk there. So part of the proactive activities, as I said, doing presentations, we put some social media out. We also did industry engagement sessions. We updated our web pages and put information in there and put out some flyers. And I think Tim will have some flyers there today to hand out, which has a code and some links back into the web page, which has some other information around safety management systems and chain of responsibility to help you with your pre-harvest work. Next one, please, Mel. So for on-road and off-road compliance activities, so the purpose of those activities is to look at, obviously, with the vehicles and drivers as far as their compliance. We also do what we call off-road activities, looking at the grain harvest management schemes and also non-participants in those schemes as far as receivers and seeing as far as mass and vehicle state that's coming in. In 2021, as you know, the COVID impact internationally continued, and it brought about a restriction of our activities because of the resource drain, particularly from policing agencies that were doing border work, managing clearances or managing isolation. So the resources that we had on road and actively looking were quite reduced. What we did see is, however, over 2,000 intercepts, and out of those 2,000 intercepts, 900 of those had detected non-compliance. So 45% non-compliance was detected. So if I look at the 2021, from my perspective, there was reduced activity undertaken on road to look at some of the compliance and conduct inspections. Looking forward, obviously the resources and the world's starting to return to some degree of normality, and we'll have increased resources on our roads as we move into this next harvest area. We are concerned about that level of non-compliance, and you'll probably see more visibility of our on-road inspectors and probably policing agencies as well. From the detected non-compliance specific areas, obviously mechanical defects was the most prevalent. Now, in 2020, I think it was, we redid our vehicle inspection manual, and part of that revisiting of the standards manual was looking at some of the defects and vehicle standards. And what it brought about was the reclassification of some defects that were previously considered major defects, and they were moved into the minor defect category. still some of those minor defects are quite serious and concerning. So when we say that we've detected the level of non-compliance, and although that the detection rate is high, there was a lot of minor defects. Obviously, some of those minor defects are still quite concerning, the impact it may have on a vehicle, particularly when you have multiple minor defects. Mass non-compliance, again, we did see mass non-compliance. Some of our on-road activity, we did some activities with some of the receivers, both participating and non-participating receivers, and we did find overmass to be an issue, some more prevalent in other areas, but it's definitely something of concern. Overmass, minor overmass, is not a major safety issue. It is concerning and it's non-compliant. What concerns us most is when you have defects, particularly around braking issues, and you're on secondary roads, potentially with some fatigue thrown in there, and you have some overmass. That's where it starts to get quite serious and quite dangerous. So it may look at it that's a slightly overmass issue and it doesn't sound much, but when it starts to get coupled with other components, it does become quite concerning. Fatigue in particular for us is concerning. As you would know, when harvest season's on, we saw it in last year, and we'll probably see it again this year based on the BOM predictions. Significant rainfall means reduced windows, and obviously when the window's there to harvest, people are going, you know, extended hours trying to get grain out of the paddock and back in the silos. Please remember that fatigue is an issue, and although you may not be driving a truck, if you're in a tractor or you're working and then you're jumping in a truck, you may be fatigued. So it's not just a matter of operating under primary production exemptions for work diaries or under 100K exemptions. You're exempt from the work diary management, but you're not exempt from fatigue. So please be mindful of your fatigue when you're operating during the harvest season. Next, please, Mark. Off-road activities, I touched on that earlier. This is about looking at some of the receivers and understanding the mass requirements are coming in. Probably one of the areas of concern is being able to adequately identify mass limits of individual vehicles. We've seen PBS vehicles in particular and a number of schemes and accreditation where the vehicle designs and makeup, their mass limits have changed, you know, dramatically over the years as far as different types of vehicles, and trying to predict exactly what that vehicle has in its mass is probably one of the things we identified with some of the receivers, that's probably an area where that could be done better. Junior staff operating weigh bridges, not fully conversant with vehicle types and mass limits. But if you are a grower or a transport operator that's moving grain in, please be mindful of those mass limits on your particular vehicle. Thanks, Mel. So just to finish up, key takeaway messages for us. And when I talk about key takeaway messages for the regulator, the purpose of our national operations and the purpose of our activities is to, you know, prevent videos like Sam's story that you just saw. It's not about how many people we can try and catch doing the wrong thing. What we're trying to do is to ensure that the harvest season goes ahead, it's productive, it's effective, and everybody returns home to their families. So that's our takeaway point. So please, from a proactive perspective with your vehicles, please ensure that they're checked, they're mechanically sound prior to the harvest season. From a safety management system, if you're a receiver or you're operating your own property, safety management systems, how do you manage your fatigue or your employees' fatigue to make sure the vehicle leaves the farm gate, the person that's operating that vehicle isn't extensively fatigued. Know your vehicle mass limits. I know on-farm mass limits is difficult at times, but you do know that you should know your own mass of your own vehicles and loading out, understand what sort of volume of grain you can put in based on the grain type. Registration and driver's licensing, obviously fairly simple, but we still do find vehicles that aren't properly registered or drivers that aren't appropriately licensed for that vehicle type and combination. So please, again, as a proactive activity, look forward, understand what your registration requirements are and the licensing of your drivers. Travel arrangements too on secondary roads. Again, with the predicted increased rainfall that we're going to likely have, it's going to impact our roads where you're operating vehicles on secondary roads, whether they're dirt roads or dirt bitumen roads. Just be mindful that if you're carrying mass and the roads are wet, just be careful when you're moving those loads around. That's about it from me. I'll throw it open for any questions or any comments.
I think you get off scot-free. No hands in the air. Yep.
If anyone has any questions, Tim's there, the safety and compliance officer's there as well. Please go to them if you have any questions, or if there's something you want to follow up at a later time. I'm more than happy to send me an email or text or ring or whatever. Tim will have the contact details there.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you very much, everyone, and good luck with the harvest.
Okay, two more and then we go outside. Insurance. So this is not Paul, this is Katrina.
So, for those who don't know, New South Wales Farmers has a very close working relationship with WFI Insurance. Thank you. Paul Joe would normally be here. We actually pay the clearing out of the joint marketing fund that New South Wales Farmers and WFI have for their different single growers. So Paul would normally be here. This is, I guess, another safety health warning is if you think that something's not right with your body, don't let it go. Listen to your body, go and see a doctor. Paul ended up with burst appendix, went septic, went very, very bad. 3 months later, he still can't wear a mask. So this is not here today working from home. So please, get yourself checked out for everything that you should be in, mainly men and farmers, but also men and women. Listen to your body, get it checked out. I'll also want to just touch on a couple of things. New South Wales Farmers have regular meetings with Transport, great working relationship with Safe Work. We parts with Mel and with Trish and with Marty with the police. We've formed a really great working relationship. So I would hope that all of the growers and drivers in the area will come to one of us if you have any issues that you see or that you have to highlight it, to raise it. Because we're all here to help you guys. Just on the railway crossings too, it's just been announced that at Rivery and at Narromine there will be a trial with 2 level crossings with LED flashing lights. So if you happen to go through Rivery and notice those, just get your feedback on what you think. And also anyone that goes up there in the Narromine area. And that's another initiative following the fatality down there. So it's good to see some things happening out of the focus and look up and read, I guess. Also with the rebates, so we've mentioned the $1,000 rebate. Also there's a quad bike rebate as well. So hopefully most of you know about that. $2,000 rebate if you have a quad bike and you want to buy side by side, $500 back on the drone, $600 back on the roller and section 5, that sort of stuff. So same sort of principle. You can do a webinar, buy your safety feature and then claim a rebate. So if you've got any questions, come and see me about that.
We've actually registered this deck, so they will count. If we can record your details today, they will count and you'll use one of that.
Great. So both the quad bike safety rebate and the all business station rebate. So that's a really good thing. The only thing I would say about side by side, for anyone that's replacing quads or buying side by sides anyway, please think about wearing the seatbelt. We've had really bad accidents and fatalities with rollovers and side by side. So they're no safer than a quad unless you put a seatbelt on. So please think about wearing seatbelts. Both in vehicles and side by sides on farm. It's like getting farmers to wear helmets. I know nobody wants to do it, but please think about doing it because you can't replace things. We'll replace a lot of things and we can, we'll get the job done, but we can't replace it. So
I did promise Paul that I would quickly run through WFI's presentations and quickly just to, because they are great people to know. They're one of the few insurers that will come on farm and you know, have a look at what you do and how you do it and do that. As we know, insurance has gone through the roof with everybody, so it's also very worthwhile getting quotes when you time for renewal. So if you're interested in getting a quote from the WFI, come and see me. I'm not going to go through the whole of the history. They've been around for a long time. They're now part of the IAG group, but still operating as WFI in their own model. They've got a lot of plans, and I guess this is the main thing. They do have commercial. I'll go through the list and then I'll click through the slides. So they've got commercial, trade, rural, crop insurance. So they do crop insurance, commercial strata, residential strata, private plan, and landlord plan. So they've got a whole suite of insurance plans. But obviously, the crop insurance and the rural insurance is what most of our members take advantage of. Yep, they do all of that. Business property damage, business interruption, general property, business liability, machinery breakdown, electronic equipment, glass breakage, employee theft, burglary theft, money, and domestic and personal insurance. So, you know, please do think about getting a quote from them and talking to them. So in their rural plans, they all do the property damage, loss of income, general property, farm transit, legal liability, machinery breakdown, electronic equipment, and burglary and theft. So if you're a member of New South Wales Farmers and you find yourself with a WFI insurance policy, you can get a rebate on your membership based on the amount of premium that you pay. We get a commission, we get part of that back. So it's a great working relationship that we have. It helps pay for a lot of the activities that we do on the ground so the 7 regional managers in New South Wales, regional 1, and our relationship with WFI is the major part of that. So we thank them for today, and so the catering and everything for today is proudly brought to you by WFI Insurance and Farmers.
Thank you. That's very important. Last, there you go. This is Bill.
I'm from Rural Diversity Mental Health Program. There's things we, one, colleagues, clients situated around all of New South Wales, rural and remote. We don't cover the city areas. Obviously, the mental health game. When I speak to most people, they say my mental health's fine, and if it's not, I have a couple more beers, and then it's okay. Which is all right for a little bit. Right? You usually wake up and you still dealing with the same issues that you were dealing with the day before. So we do know that mental health is a major concern in New South Wales. It's the 3rd largest disease burden in Australia for adults. For people 15 to 24, it is the #1 disease burden, and the suicide rates in New South Wales are concerning. Now, between 12 and 13 per 100,000 population. When we think about our Indigenous communities, we can double those stats per 100,000. We know the suicide rate in the country, New South Wales, is double that of the city. It's an issue. I'm not going to talk about suicide directly because nobody wakes up in the morning and sort of goes, you know what, I think today's going to be the day they take my life. No, it's a build-up. So what we speak about more typically are managing our stress, recognizing if we're depressed, and how to manage those things in early intervention so that we don't actually have to get to that point end of the stick where we need to draw on these professional services that are really hard to actually access. So let's have just a quick consideration about our mental health then. We know that in Australia, in every previous 12 months, 1 in 5 people have a diagnosable mental health condition. The big ones, anxiety, depression, substance use disorders. 1 in 5 people. And we know that that stat is conservative because that's a household telephone survey. So we know that people aren't being surveyed, people in prisons, people who are homeless, people living on the bridges. people in nursing homes, they're not even considered in these stats. And we've still got 1 in 5 people. When we think about the people who access the help they need, we know that 55% of people will actually get professional help. 40% of guys will get professional help. And for guys, after the first appointment, 26% of those people drop out. So we're not real good at actually getting the help at that pointy end of the stick, which is why it's really important to look after ourselves early. So how do we know that we're starting to slide in terms of being well to coming down to somewhere where we're really unwell? It's probably easier to pick it up with your friends, your family, your mates, or sit with them. But if we can each do that for each other, if we can pick up our mates and ask our mates to pick it up for us, then we'll be okay. What we look for is the changes from what is that person's baseline normal. Changes in thoughts, feelings, and behaviours that will also reflect in our bodies. But let's just focus predominantly on thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. So if you've got a mate and he's thinking now, and you start to hear you articulating things like, what's the point? I can't do this anymore. I've already signed 3 times and it's all because of bloody water. I'm not going to do this anymore. They're triggering words and language. When you start to hear expressions of hopelessness, pointlessness, no future, then you have a conversation and say, mate, it sounds like you're doing it really tough. How are you actually going? I'm not talking about your crop, I'm not talking about your farm. How are you going? Okay, do you pick up those warning signs? That's the thing. Feelings. I'm just flat, lethargic, I'm no longer motivated, I don't care anymore, I can't do this anymore. Those sort of feelings, I'm just always feeling sad, I'm always feeling crook, I'm always feeling funny in the gut, you know, I'm feeling something in here, and I keep going and seeing the GP, and they say there's nothing wrong with me, but I know there's something wrong with me. That could be anxiety. If you're feeling in the gut, it's probably anxiety. So it may simply mean you need to go and say to your mate, well, how about you go back to your GP? It sounds like you've got a lot of unconnected sort of symptoms happening here, and just ask your GP, could this be anxiety, could this be depression? Your GP's got a really easy screening test, it's called a DAS, 25 questions, tick a box, and from that, your GP will be able to say, well, from this, you're screening really high in the anxiety or the stress or even depression. How about we look at doing something about that? When it comes to trying to manage things ourselves, this is a really easy way to do an early intervention on high levels of stress. What we see is that there are 3 concentric circles. Sometimes people get stuck on that outside circle of concern. That outside circle of concern could be like the water. It could be, I can't get my word properly. It could be mice, it could be drought. It could be anything. It could be getting the kids ready for school, getting them on the bus on time. It could be anything that causes a concern. If we get stuck there, I can't get the kids out of bed, I can't get them on the bus, I can't manage this or whatever. If we get stuck there, then what we end up doing is getting exhausted and nothing's actually changed. So what we've got to do is identify the concern, move into what we can actually influence. So if it's getting the kids ready for school, what can we actually do to make it easy to get the kids ready for school? You know, maybe we've got to start thinking about uniforms the night before, making sure they know where the shoes are. That used to do my head in. What do you mean you can't find your shoes? You had them on 9 years ago. It's safe, just go and find your shoes. When my boy came out from school one day wearing one of my ties, I thought, oh, for God's sake, come on, you've got to know where your tie is. You had it yesterday. So what we did is I had to figure out what did I influence there. I made sure they had their shoes, their uniform, everything together the night before, so I didn't have to worry about it all in the morning. It's just trying to problem solve this stuff. Easy to do it when you're in a good headspace, because when you're not in a good headspace, you can't think creatively. Prefrontal cortex shuts down, you can't think creatively, executive functioning is gone, you can't problem solve, and it becomes an increasing problem. So deal with it early on. That's the influence. And then essentially what we've got to do is figure out what it is that we can actually control. What, when, with whom, how, all those practical questions that we can come to, and then that is your problem solving. That will diminish the stress of the concern. It makes logical sense. And you can probably picture scenarios in your own imagination as I'm discussing. Even if it's just meeting a deadline. Don't like, oh, deadline. What do I do? I'm supposed to get a start on this. I'll ask someone how I can actually do it. Okay, I'm going to make a start on that this evening. You've got control of concerns for all your stress. Yeah. The other thing I want to speak on briefly is intrinsic values. This is essentially stuff that's important to you. Now, it's the inside values. Remember, stuff that's important to me. I'm not talking about you managing your mortgage, managing your debt, managing your property, managing your house. I'm not talking about that stuff. That's in extrinsic values. Think about the stuff that's actually important to you. Because often we get caught up in being so busy doing what we've got to do, we actually forget about ourselves. We forget about our humanity. We forget about our relationships. I spoke to a person who was just so bloody miserable. I said, what do you do for yourself? Well, I don't know, I go to work. No, that's work. What do you do for you? Wasn't doing anything for him. So what did you enjoy doing? I can't remember. This is bridging the conversation. What did you used to enjoy? We used to enjoy playing tennis. Oh, when was your last game of tennis? I think it was about 18. I was like, this is crazy stuff. We forget about us because we're so busy with relationships and kids and work and farming and everything else, we forget about ourselves. It's important to occasionally prioritize you. Because if you don't look after your mental health, you will as sure as hell look after your sickness. You won't have a choice. So let's look after our well-being instead. A simple thing is, make a list of things that, I used to really enjoy doing this stuff. And then once a week, just pick one of those. Something simple. Yeah. I was talking to a guy who used to do a hay during the drought down south of Victoria. And I said, how do you have these conversations with these guys you go and visit? He said, I give them a colouring in book and colouring in pencils. They said, are you serious? He said, yes, because it's something that they can do by themselves, just colouring in and just gets their head out of the drought. Such a simple solution. Just do something for you. Yeah. And if we do it on a regular basis, it just maintains our well-being so that we can actually then do the stuff that we have to do. That's it for me. And of course, there's a whole stack of stuff to tell you about. I know you're all riveting to find out. So you're welcome to come see me up. Anyway.
Questions? And you know what, we made up all that time, and we got 5 minutes over. Thank you. So I guess to wrap it up, please don't forget to fill in the feedback forms. Now that we've finished, you can do that. And then we'll grab some morning tea, because the lovely ladies are bringing that out now. So we'll grab some morning tea and we'll head outside to chat to all those agencies that you now want to go and see. And have a look at some machinery. I would like to thank everyone that's here that presented or involved in some way putting it together, or funding it, picking up for the way. And Bob, I haven't mentioned you, but lucky last. Bob, this was an initiative of the Custom Harvesters how many years ago? 25 years ago. Yeah, I'm sort of broadened it out to pick up more of the farming community. So thank you, Bob, for all the work you've done up to now.
I'd like to also put your hands together for Mel, because without Mel, this whole exercise today was, as I said, we started 20 odd years ago. I was asked that question last night. Used to run at the showground. We did it. That was Julie start to Mommy Peace, a few local inspectors. That's how it all got started. It's just grown from there over the time, each time. So I really appreciate from NHBR, Transport New South Wales, Highway Patrol, this over here, all the rest of them. Coming along, I really do appreciate this. They can see what we try to do, and we appreciate what they're doing. So again, thank you very much, and thank you, Mel, for that.
And I haven't forgotten about you guys online. Thanks for dialing in online. I will email you all the QR code. I'll put it back on the slide so you can see it, but I can also QR code it, send you the link so you can fill in the feedback form about how the online bit worked. But yeah, thanks so much for coming. I hope it was useful, and definitely take advantage of chatting to everybody outside, if you want to.
And we've got the machines outside.
And we've got the machines outside too. What have we got, Bob? Tell us about what we've got. We've got that.
So can I just find out where the sign-in sheet is?
Here.
If you haven't signed in the sign-in sheet, can you please do so that we can email you all the stuff that we're going to email you? Can't do it without your email. So.
Everybody can sign it there.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks guys online. I'll go back to that slide. You don't have to want to be.